How can a sales team make the most of thought leadership? If you're a sales professional, how do you use your organization's thought leadership to be more successful as a salesperson? And if you're a thought leadership practitioner, how do you equip sales teams with the insights they need to sell, both this quarter and into the future? In this episode, we'll take a deep dive into the intersection of thought leadership and sales. I've invited Kelly Wright to join me. Kelly is currently the president and COO of Gong, a technology platform that helps sales teams analyze customer interactions and unlock reality through data analysis. Earlier in her career, Kelly built and led the original revenue team at Tableau Software, growing revenue from 0 to 850 million. And Kelly is also the founder of Culture Driven Sales, a thought leadership platform based on the proposition that culture leads sales. Today's conversation will be about creating impact through ideas, both through culture and sales. I'm Bill Sherman, and you're listening to Leveraging Thought Leadership. Ready? Let's begin. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you, Bill. It's so great to be here. I've been listening to this podcast for a long time, so it's fun to be on it.
Oh, that's so nice of you. So you and I have had some wonderful conversations around thought leadership back and forth offline. And so I'm excited to be able to sit down with you today and share a little bit of the conversation around thought leadership. And I know that you describe yourself as someone who loves sales and culture and data. We're going to touch on all of those, but I want to add a fourth into the mix today. And that's thought leadership, because I know you have a passion for that as well.
I do. You know all my passions well, Bill.
So let's start with thought leadership and sales. How do they connect in your mind? You come from a sales background, so is it this thing that sits on the side? Is it something that's important for sales? How they connect?
Well, Bill, I think a lot of sales people don't really quite grasp how powerful thought leadership can be in selling. And it actually, if you look at the top sales leaders and the top sales people, they're really great at thought leadership. Because if you think about what a good salesperson does, is a good salesperson is able to tell the story of what is the status quo, and then be able to articulate what are the challenges with the status quo and why there is actually a better desired state, which is different. And to be able to craft that narrative and to do that storytelling to say, hey, this is where you are now. And here are the challenges with the now. But there is a better way, and it's over here. That's what salespeople are doing. And sometimes people get so focused on there's the talk track, there's the playbook. I'm going to push our features and functions. That is what salespeople often do, but that's not the top best way of sales. The top best way of sales is craft the story about how there is a better way. And that, in my opinion, is almost one and the same as thought leadership.
So the way that I describe thought leadership is around seeing around the corner into the future, figuring out what's important, and then bring that idea back to people today who need those insights and guiding them on what they need to do. And I think you can make a very similar sort of framework to thought leadership is sales in some way. It's selling a vision of the future.
Yeah, it's selling a vision of the future, and it's challenging the status quo. So it's not only selling the vision of the future, it is sometimes people will have an aligned view of the future, but they think they're on that path already. And if you're going to sell something, you need to drive someone to actually do a change and to evolve and to transform. And that's what salespeople are doing. So that's not the kind of on the first. The second part is when you think about great salespeople and what customers are looking for, things have evolved over time. It used to be that companies would just go to a company or a vendor because they want something very specific. But now the world is so competitive and there's so many different options that companies don't want to work with the vendor who's just going to sell them a widget or a service. They want to work with partners who they see as thought leadership partners, who are going to challenge them, who are going to make them better, who are going to teach them, who are going to lead. And thought leadership helps to create this framework to lead, to transform, to challenge, to up level. It's not just about, hey, this is what I do. Let me show you my features and functions. It's about, hey, we want to partner with you together to take you to someplace better, to help you transform and improve. And thought leadership is one-on-one with how we work on that sales journey.
So let's talk about in terms of developing sales and sales culture, which I know is something you're passionate about. How do you make that connection to sales folks who are just starting out on that journey to help them realize that their responsibility isn't the feature and function, but that storytelling and perhaps even the 3 stories they need to be able to tell?
Yes. Well, if someone's early in their journey or even early with the new company, the first things that a salesperson will be interested to know is, hey, what are the features and what are the functions? But if that's we as sales leaders or as company execs or sales managers or enablement, whoever, if that's all we give the salespeople, that's what they're going to go sell, the features and the functions, because that's all that they're equipped to have. So I think that the responsibility is on everyone who's equipping those new sales folks to be able to be really thoughtful about what is the mission? What is the vision of the company? What is the strategic narrative that we're trying to tell? And to make that a bit more pointed, companies spend so much time focusing on the what and the how. What is it that they do? What are their features? What is their product? What are their services? How does it work? How can you integrate it? How can you launch it? How can you implement it? And that actually is the easy part because it's very tangible and tactical to talk about how to do that. The much more challenging part is to be able to tell the story of why does this matter? Why do customers even care? Why is this important? And because that is hard and everyone's moving so fast, sometimes companies will skip that part. And so then new employees come in and they're just given the what and the how. But if we can give everyone and frame that story around the why does it matter? Why should companies care? What is the set of beliefs that you must have to actually be able to transform and change in the way that's really important to you? Not only does that help in terms of our selling, it also really helps to create a unified sense of purpose for our employees, for our company, and for all of our customers who want to be part of our journey with us. And so that whole unified purpose, mission, vision, that needs to come first before we focus too much on the what and the how. And if you think about with thought leadership, that's what thought leadership is doing, is saying, hey, what is this new story? What is this narrative? And then you fold everything else underneath it.
I like how you prioritize that understanding of the story and communicating a vision. And the way you're describing it, it's not only a story to the customers, but it's a story to the organization, your frontline salespeople, everyone in the organization, so they know what journey are we going on together and why.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much in the world now where people are talking about culture and creating great workplaces. And sometimes people think it's just hiring a bunch of great people, which is really important. We should do that too. And throwing them all together. It's just what fuels people is having a unified sense of purpose and knowing how can they contribute to that purpose? How can they have a meaningful impact? And just like customers want to associate with companies and vendors that have a shared sense of belief about where they're going and to help them solve their challenges and do that all together, employees want to do that internally. They want to be able to be part of a company where they believe in what the company's mission is. They believe in the journey that you're going on. And so this mission and vision creates a great culture, not only for the way companies are interacting with their customers and partners, but also really important for how companies build great cultures internally and create really sustaining and positive places to work.
So, if I hear you correctly, one of the things I hear you saying is that culture and thought leadership really are fundamental building blocks to growth.
Yes, I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about Gong and dive into the world of Gong. So, how is Gong as an organization using thought leadership? What are you trying to achieve?
I love that. And actually, one of the reasons that I joined Gong, I started at Gong first on the board and then joined as full time in operational capacity. And as you know, Bill, I've been working with you for quite some time on thought leadership. I love Gong's approach to thought leadership because at Gong, we are trying to transform the world of sales and transform the way companies think about interacting with their customers and getting the most out of all of their teams. And that requires quite a bit of thought leadership. Why is that? Because the world of sales hasn't been disrupted and transformed for a very long time, which is crazy if you look at it, because so many of the other functions have been transformed. You look at, especially when using technology, technology has transformed how product works, how the marketing function works, how HR works. And you go through all the different groups, but hasn't so much in sales. And we're in the middle of this transformation right now. And so at Gong, there's a few practical ways that I'll talk about how we're using thought leadership, and then we can dive in more. The first is we're trying to create a new category of how transforming the world of sales, of revenue, and customer conversations. Well, how do you transform? You transform through thought leadership. And so first we have our strategic message, our strategic narrative that starts again with our mission. Our mission at Gong is we unlock reality to help people and companies reach their full potential. Well, what does that mean? And why does that actually even matter? Well, our view of the world, because remember, thought leadership is helping to align with customers and prospects that have similar beliefs that you have. And some you'll be able to move along the journey. They maybe don't fully believe now, but then they go there. Others are already there. But our belief is if you think about what is going on in the world of sales, running a business can be really challenging. And why is that? Well, our belief is, and this is what our customers are telling us, so it's not only our belief, is that many decisions are made very opinion-based because there's all this data, but it's hard to corral all the data together. Second is that running a business is very labor-intensive. There's all these mundane tasks that people need to do that is very time-consuming, and it's not a good optimization of their time and productivity. And three, teams can be really misaligned because everyone's moving so quickly that sometimes you'll have one team going one direction, a different team going another direction. That's really disruptive. So at Gong, we believe to unlock reality, we should have organizations should we really be focused on being reality driven, having fact and data driven decisions. Two, being able to be autonomous. How can we have autonomous systems that help guide people of what to do to remove those mundane tasks and help them be able to get more done without having to lift a finger? And three, doing it in a way where it drives more alignment and teams are aligned, driving better collaboration and communication and a unified voice of the customer. So one of the things I just did there is that was a thought leadership. Like if people believe unlocking reality is important and those were challenges and now they want to go in this way, then that's how we're leading the conversation, the story to say, if you believe that you want a world that's reality driven, autonomous, and teams and people are aligned, then we should talk.
So, what I love about that as well is that it is an inductive process and you're leading people along and saying, hey, are these things that you agree with? Are these things that you want? And with that, I think about when you're talking about integrating that reality and unlocking reality, right? Having a common language across the organization and say, what are we not seeing so that we can empower our people to perform better? Because to your point earlier, if you hire great people and then you bury them in tasks, that's no good, right? You've got to allow them to shine and to flourish.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely correct. And then there's a side piece to this too, Bill. So one is the big picture in thought leadership that we just talked about. Like if customers care and prospects care about unlocking reality, that's the strategic narrative. That's the story we're telling.
Mhm.
And salespeople should be really good at being able to communicate and tell that story. At the same time, though, that's really can be high level. And so sometimes people will say, okay, well, thought leadership, is it always just about like head in the clouds and salespeople are doing this kind of pie in the sky thing? Like, what about when the prospect or the customer says, well, what do you mean by that? Like, how can I actually learn and benefit? So there need to be tangible, tactical ways to implement that thought leadership too. So I'll give you another example of what we're doing at Gong that kind of shows how we take unlock reality and then drive that down to mean something. So we have here at Gong Labs. And I love what we're doing with Gong Labs because remember, I'm someone that cares about sales, data, transforming technology companies and culture, right? And Gong Labs kind of fuses all of that together, just like Gong does. But so we just made a post last week for Gong Labs of what were the top 5 data-backed sales tips of 2021. So periodically, Gong Labs goes and looks at all of the data that we're learning from all of our customers, and they post some different pieces of insights. And so if you think about what Gong is doing, we're saying our story is we unlock reality. We're helping to drive autonomous insights to help people be better aligned and to make reality-based decisions. That's what we're saying we're good at. So what do? We go and collect all this customer conversation that we have in this huge data center, and we can actually go and look at what's happening in all of the data. So one example that we had last week that we had posted was beware of selling with slides. Okay, so people go, beware of selling with slides. Well, but all sales teams sell with slides. Well, what Gong Labs did, and this is an amazing part that we have a whole group on our marketing team that goes and looks, they looked at over 803,000 recorded sales meetings, almost 1 million sales meetings. And they found that there's statistical reality-based evidence that shows that win rates literally drop 17% when reps use slides on discovery calls. Discovery calls is early on in the conversation. Now, some people might say, but everyone uses slides in the discovery calls because that's when you're making your pitch. And the interesting thing is that might even be why. Because if you have salespeople that are presenting and only talking about themselves in discovery,
rather than listening.
Right,
Yeah.
when discovery is supposed to be about listening and interactive conversation about discovering what is their problem, then you're not going to be able to get very far on the sales call. So this was a very tactical Gong Labs of implementing our own thought leadership by showing data-driven thought leadership that companies can go and learn and lead from.
Well, and what I love, and I followed a lot of the Gong Labs posts on this, is it's sometimes quantifying things that you intuitively know and feel, but haven't been able to put a finger on. So there was another piece there that looked at the data about what do you do towards the end of the year? And if a deal doesn't close before calendar year, what is the effect of having to try and pick it up in the next year? I think every salesperson has wrestled with that and go, oh, we're going to go cold for a couple of weeks here, but they can't quantify the impact individually, right? And so you put out the data from Gong Labs and said, no, here's the effect. I think it was what, about 40%, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it's a lot. We'll have to go look at all the Gong Lab results. The interesting thing though, Bill, what you just said is you actually just furthered our own thought leadership. Because what you just said is a lot of sales leaders have a hunch. They just intuitively know. And this is one of the challenges with sales is that many decisions are just opinion-based. People have this hunch and now they want to back it up with data, but they don't know how. And so Gong Labs is helping people to back up their own hunches with reality-based insights which is the whole thing of what we're saying Gong helps companies to do. Have reality, fact-based decision-making to be able to, it's okay to have a hunch and opinion, but go validate it and be able to prove or disprove your hunch with actual data and reality.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. And so I think this goes to one of the pieces that, since you've been in sales almost your entire life and your entire career, right? And there's a lack of sales training in terms of if you're pursuing a degree, even courses on go to market, for example. And I know you've tried to shape, what does that look like? And how do you look at this as a unified whole? You want to talk maybe for a little bit about the development of your own thought leadership based on go to market? Because I think that's really an important piece in this story.
Well, I did see, Bill, that there was a gap in terms of just how companies were operating and setting up their whole go-to-market strategy. And a personal story of just how I came to realize and have this epiphany is I spent 12 years at Tableau. I was the first salesperson at Tableau. I was employee 10. I joined there 1 month before we launched version 1. I had never been at a big public technology company before. And the whole leadership team there, we were figuring out things on our own. Like, how do we go build this? And we had a very compelling mission, or what we thought was a compelling mission there at Tableau was we help people see and understand data. And so we were trying to do this whole thought leadership before we even knew it was called thought leadership, frankly, of, hey, there's a way of people are so frustrated because they can't tap into their data and they don't understand how to answer their own questions and they don't have the systems. They don't know how to operate systems that can generate the answers to their question. And so we realized that there was this world where people really wanted to tap into data to be able to do their own work, but they couldn't. It was too complex and it was inflexible. And there were very highly tailored people that were able to do it. So we realized, hey, this whole data democratization, how can we make people more self-sufficient with their data? And we crafted this whole story around it. And it all started, Bill, from this mission to help people see and understand data. And this strategic narrative where we put these differentiated value propositions around that it would make people much faster and more productive. It would make them more self-sufficient. And as we told that story about why Tableau got started in the first place, it really resonated with people. And we built this story in a way. And while we were building it, we realized 2 things. One is we knew we were committed to going and building a very fast-growing company that created huge value for our customers and a great return for our investors. But at the same time, to hire people that worked at Tableau, where the mission of helping people see and understand data really resonated for them. They cared about that purpose. And we built this great culture around why people cared about data, why they cared about our core values. And it ended up creating a really special place where people felt that they could come do their best work and be very authentic to not only themselves, but to be able to tell Tableau's story and emotionally connect with our customers in a way that they really cared. And so you take that whole story and that just felt natural. That's how we did it at Tableau. And then when I, after 12 years, decided I wanted to do board work and do advising for other companies, a lot of these tech CEOs, and I ended up meeting with in the first 18 months, about 130 technology CEOs of hyper-growth companies. And they'd ask, hey, Kelly, how do we build a hyper-growth sales organization? How do we make sure sales and marketing is aligned? How do we make sure a sales team is selling what product team wants to sell or wants to build? And when I asked these questions, well, tell me about your mission and vision and your values, it became very apparent that many companies focus so much on the what and the how, they didn't focus enough on what was their aligned mission and where were they going. And it made me realize, everyone's saying that they want a sales course and a go-to-market course, and everyone's focused on all these operational details. But the alignment and being able to fuel a really fantastic go-to-market organization, it's the thought leadership it needs to go all the way up the chain of, do we have an aligned mission, vision, and values? Can we tell our story in a way that's really compelling? And then layer everything underneath that. And that's what my class is about.
So when did you first have that aha moment that you realized, oh, I'm doing something I could call thought leadership? Because it sounded like you fell into it. Like you said, at Tableau, you were just trying to solve the problem at hand. When was your aha moment that you were practicing thought leadership?
That's a great question, Bill. I think what happened is, in the first year when I was meeting with a bunch of tech CEOs, venture capitalists, private equity firms, and everyone was saying, hey, what is your advice for building a hypergrowth sales organization? And the questions that I was getting and what I was hearing was, what do we do when sales is headed in one direction and marketing is the other? What do we do when we don't have alignment? How should we build an enterprise sales team? How should we go international? And there were all these real tactical questions. It was just natural for me. I'd say, what are you trying to do? What's your mission? What's your why? And many times the CEO or the executives would really struggle with answering that. And then if I felt that there was something there, maybe I'd go ask another executive on the team, how would you describe the mission? And it became very clear when it wasn't crisp and it wasn't articulate. And then people wonder why they don't have alignment. And to me, it was so crystal clear, because if you ask two different people on the executive team, what's your mission? And you get two different answers. And then if you ask seven people, you get seven different answers. That's a problem. And so I started kind of poking holes on this in my conversations with all these CEOs. And actually, a number of the CEOs would say, that's interesting. Let's dive into our why. And then there were a number of CEOs that Bill had very different opinions that would say, that's not important. Kelly, we don't want to have a conversation with you about mission and vision. We want to have a conversation with you about operational efficiency. And that's one of the things I realized is, with thought leadership, everyone's not going to necessarily believe what you believe. And that's okay. That's why it's called thought leadership. If everyone already believed it, there wouldn't need to be a thought leadership around it. And I felt like, you know what? There are not tons of classes around how to do sales, but there's many more classes on how to do sales and how to go light up a sales organization or how to do sales training. There's a lot on how to go build a great marketing or branding strategy. And there was very, very little of how to set up an integrated go-to-market strategy that threads first from mission, vision, and company's core values to be able to create a compelling strategic narrative. And that strategic narrative not only helps sell, but it also creates just a positive culture with that unified sense of purpose. And I felt like this was a big gaping hole. And so decided, hey, I want to teach a class on it. And then that's where it all started.
So one of the things that I hope our listeners can hear is the energy and passion when you start talking about these subjects. And I want to push a little bit further into that. How do these ideas, and ideas are sort of the atoms, if you will, of thought leadership, how do these ideas around culture and culture-driven sales impact how you lead?
Well, let's go back to these conversations with all of these different execs that I had when first thinking about this thought leadership. When people would ask me questions of, hey, Kelly, what are your top priorities for these different phases of a company's growth? And everyone always had these preconceived notions of where they were headed. So they'd say, oh, well, maybe it's a pre-IPO company and we're growing, or maybe it's a bigger company. And what would be your priorities when we're launching a new product? Or what's your priorities when we're going international or trying to drive more productivity? And I think people felt like I would have these different answers depending on what phase of the company they were in. And what I realized, and this goes to answer your question of how I lead, I truly believe that regardless of what stage of company you're at, and regardless of what you're trying to do or what your that year's company strategic initiatives are, that the three priorities for me are always the same. So people would say, what are your priorities? And I'll tell you what my priorities are because they never change. When someone says, well, Kelly, what should the top three priorities be? I say, well, number one priority is people. Number two priority is people. And Bill, you've heard this before, but number three priority, what's that? Everyone can
People.
guess. It's people. And so I feel like it's really, truly, it's people who are building products and services. It's people who are interacting with their customers. It's people who are driving the success of the customers. It's people who are hiring other people on our team. And then it's people who are leading those people. Overall, it's people all the time who are making the decisions. And it's people who build companies. And if you think about that tied back to this thought leadership and what I mean by culture-driven sales, it's people authentically connecting with other people. And that means people need to be connecting with other people when you're hiring them internally because you're your top asset. But it's also how are people interacting with our prospects and our customers in an authentic way where we can emotionally connect and understand their why and why they care, not just the what and the how. And it all comes back to people, which is what puts culture at the basis of how we sell. It's culture and people at the basis of everything. Now, of course, for me, my focus is transforming the world of sales. And I truly believe that people and culture helps to sell better for all the reasons we've talked about. And I'm super passionate about data because data can help to validate that reality-driven approach to be able to justify that what you're saying is not just a bunch of opinions. It actually has clout and facts and truth behind it. And so although I'm all about sales and I'm all about data, it literally all comes first to people and culture. And that's the center of everything that I do and what I'm talking about when I'm using my own thought leadership.
And this is one of the things that I love about your work. Not only do you use thought leadership as a practitioner individually, but you encourage people within the organization to bring good ideas forward, to elevate them into conversations with colleagues, with customers. And that's really what I see as a thought leadership driven organization as much as a culture driven organization. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask you a question that I ask most of my guests, which is one of looking back. If you were to advise yourself earlier on, as you were getting into this world of thought leadership and starting as a leader, what advice would you give yourself to be more effective in the practice of thought leadership?
That's interesting because if I think about selling, one of the things that any sales leader and any great sales practitioner will know is as you're selling, a lot of it comes to making sure you're spending your time on those that meet your ideal customer profile, right? Not everyone is going to buy what you're selling. And it's important to know, well, how do you have conversations with those who believe what you believe and those who actually are interested enough to learn more and can maybe be swayed by that? And then there's some people that they literally don't care or they just are not buying what you're selling. And I think with thought leadership, it's very similar of so many people with thought leadership, they want everyone to buy off on their thought leadership. Because like for me, I'm super passionate. Someone says, I don't want to put people first or I don't believe in culture. I literally I don't understand where they're coming from. But the thing is that they're not going to care about culture-driven sales or about anything of what I'm doing with my own thought leadership if they don't believe that people and culture is at the center and that salespeople aren't meant to emotionally connect with other people and that they truly believe companies just sell to companies because the feature functions, not because people buy from people. Now, all that to me just seems like it's base level of truth, but it's okay. I mean, with thought leadership, everyone's not going to buy what you're selling. And I think that it wouldn't be thought leadership if everyone did. If everyone already believed that it was just the de facto truth, then why would you have anyone have thought leadership to try to change it or to up-level the conversation? So I think for me, it was part of my learning is I need to put the same lens on my own thought leadership as I have always in sales leadership of training the sales team of it's okay if not everyone believes what you believe because thought leadership wouldn't exist if everyone already believed, if everyone had the universal beliefs.
And I think that's a great way to close out is thought leadership is the art of becoming deeply relevant to a very small part of the world and deeply irrelevant to those who aren't tuned in.
Hey, I will challenge you a little bit on that with the thought leadership to the thought leadership advisor to become deeply relevant to a small percent of the world and not relevant to those where it's not. I will just say sometimes thought leadership can become deeply relevant to a very large percentage of the
absolutely.
world.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a small sliver, but we should focus on those where they actually do believe what we believe.
And you can create impact.
Open. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kelly.
Thank you, Bill. And I think for all of the listeners out there, Bill, I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Thought Leadership Leverage for being just a phenomenal thought partner and pushing the envelope of how companies and individuals should be thinking about thought leadership and putting some framework around it. I think it's super helpful.
Thank you. If you're interested in organizational thought leadership, then I invite you to subscribe to the OrgTL newsletter. Each month, we talk about the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organizations. Go to the website orgtl.com and choose Join Our Newsletter. I'll leave a link to the website as well as my LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing what you thought of the show.